Mike Matchett with Small World Big Data, and I'm here with a bunch of really great Zerto people. Right now I've got Steve Blow, who's a technology evangelist. Steve and I have been talking about multi-cloud and hybrid cloud for a while, and we're going to explore a little bit now with Steve about what's in Zerto that supports that. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
So tell us a little bit, first of all, what you guys see as multi-cloud. What does multi-cloud mean to Zerto?
I guess, you look, there's a lot of cloud platforms now out there, and the definition of cloud in itself is, fairly loose.
No.
But there's not one cloud for all, in that you've got lots of different workloads. Certain clouds are better for some workloads, other clouds are better for different workloads. So what we're seeing is actually a lot of customers are adopting multiple clouds to ensure that they're getting the most out of that cloud platform based on what their application requirements are.
Does multi-cloud encompass hybrid cloud to you guys too? I mean, does that on-premise part play into that, or is that a kind of a different concern?
No, I mean, it obviously depends on the customer and what they've decided to do, but multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, we talk about them as one essentially in this use case.
So can you make all the locations, whether they're on-premise or cloud, look the same in terms of what you're doing?
Absolutely, single user interface that doesn't change regardless of where you deploy it. So that's really powerful to ensure the simplicity that Zerto looks to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, we've noticed that in our research that people are quickly getting to the point where they do have things running in multiple clouds. Sometimes it's just private clouds, but even then, they've got multiple private clouds, or they've got a private cloud over here, and they use a little bit in Amazon, they use a little bit in Azure, and they start to add up all the departmental usages. And even if they don't think they're a multi-cloud organization, they really are.
Yes.
They've got multiple credit card numbers and multiple cloud providers.
Yeah.
They're paying for it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is, that whole strategy being adopted by quite a lot of enterprises, and I think that's only going to grow. I guess the challenge you've got with all of those is when you're placing your workloads on these different platforms, you're doing it based on your day one requirements.
Okay.
Really, the key to getting the most out of that is actually to be able to respond to when those requirements change, which they do.
And I wanted to ask you about that. So, we heard of people using Zerto for migration, right? And I assume that means we can migrate from on-premise into cloud, or from one cloud to another.
Yeah.
Do you see people doing more advanced things, like starting to get into brokerage and moving things based on cost or capacity, as you were getting at?
So yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole breadth of products out there that help you define and have visibility of what costs are, and where maybe you're going to get greater efficiencies and things. But yeah, Zerto fits really well in actually providing that mobility across those platforms and being able to move your workloads around in just a few minutes. And as you say, the key driver for a lot of this is cost.
Yeah, cost. So let's take a look at a quick demo of this, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, let's take a look.
We're looking at the Zerto dashboard, and you're going to show us a little bit about some of the multi-cloud, hyper-cloud options that you have in there, specifically how someone can deal with different cloud providers through the consistent Zerto interface, right?
Absolutely. So obviously, customers are looking at those hybrid cloud, multi-cloud solutions, actually deploying on them, whereby they're not using a single platform. There's obviously multiple platforms involved. That traditionally has been very complex. What Zerto gives you is that single interface across all of the platforms. So it's a single platform. You don't install different products in different environments. You install Zerto, and that gives you the full capability across all the platforms that we support, which is obviously VMware, Hyper-V, AWS, and Azure today. What you can see here is obviously that was a dashboard, and these are virtual protection groups. Our virtual protection groups are how we protect your workloads. I'm not going to go into too much detail around those right now. More, I want to go into the orchestration capabilities we have across the different platforms that we support.
All right. So virtual protection groups, like a workload, can have many different machines and things in it, resources in it, and you're going to protect them as a set.
Yeah, it's a consistency grouping, so we ensure consistency across all of the VMs and within that virtual protection group, correct?
Okay, great.
So if we start with our AWS virtual protection group, and if I edit this VPG, essentially what you'll notice as we go through this is that there's different options available from a configuration perspective, depending on what the target environment is. So you can see all of these VPGs are being replicated from a VMware environment. So when we go through, you can see I've obviously got a single VM protected in this particular VPG. And you can see at this point, when we get to the replication tab, that I've already selected the AWS site. So this VPG is already being replicated into AWS. I then have a few options here. So I can choose my journal history. This is essentially your retention period within our short-term journal. So that can go up to 30 days today. You know, target RPO alerts, test reminders, exactly what they sound like. In the storage element, you can choose which disks you want to mark as temp data. So you'll see every single disk attached to the VMs you've chosen to protect here. And you can mark each of these as temp data. If you mark a disk as temp data, we won't replicate any of the changes that have occurred after the initial sync has taken place. But the real differences here are on the recovery tab. So you can see in here that actually we provide you the ability to choose which VPC network you want to recover into within AWS, which subnet, which security group, and even which instance family and instance type you want to recover into.
And this is not written in stone. If I wanted to come back and recover somewhere else, I could do that.
Absolutely, you can change all of these settings at any point.
Okay.
So what you're setting here is obviously you've got the live failover or move settings. So if you were doing a move, for example, you could obviously configure where you'd want to move into. You also have the failover test, and this gives you the ability to set slightly different settings. With a failover test, production stays up and running, so it's not impacted. So it just means that you can ensure when you do a test, you're keeping it isolated from that production environment. Likewise, this is obviously the VPG defaults. If you go to advanced VM settings, you can select a particular VM and then go in and edit all of these settings on a per VM basis as well.
Okay.
We have a couple of options for import in AWS depending on speed and ultimately the access you have to the source VMs. Most people are going to utilize the Zerto import for data volumes. Some people will use it for all volumes. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the differences between there, but ultimately this is really about the different levels of integration we have within AWS. Again, the key aspect with Zerto is we're not installing agents into any of your VMs. All of these platforms that we support, we're integrating with natively.
Right.
So if we then have a look at, for example, the VMware one. So if we have a look at one of the VMware VPGs, and we'll have a look at the different options you get within there. Again, showing you the level of integration and orchestration we have with each specific platform. So again, you're choosing which VMs you want. You've got your boot order up here as well. You have a few more options in here with regards to where you're recovering to. So you can choose whether you're recovering to a specific host or cluster. And you can also choose which is the default data store to recover all of the volumes into. So these are your defaults. Again, you can alter some of these on a per VM basis. We actually provide you more granularity than on a per VM basis. You can change this on a per disk basis.
Okay.
So obviously with a VMware environment, you're likely going to have multiple data stores, may well have multiple different arrays behind that data store, but most likely you're going to have different tiers of storage within an array anyway. This gives you the ability to select which data store you want each disk to be recovered into. So you've got that complete granularity there. We even support the likes of raw device mappings. So you can obviously still replicate those and maintain that raw device mapping on the target side as well. You can choose thin or thick provisioned and also select temp data. Again, that's the same as it was within the AWS temp data capability. On the recovery tab, you're choosing which networks, virtual networks for live failover and test failover. Again, they're the defaults, and which folder you want to recover into within VMware and vCenter, if you've got a folder structure in there. And then we break out every single NIC in the same way we do the storage, so you can individually configure each NIC on the attached VMs and choose different settings for these. So that obviously gives you complete customization there. I don't have VMware tools installed on this particular VM, but you can actually come in here and, in fact, I could probably show you on a different one. You can actually come in and on the NICs tab, if you do edit selected, you can actually configure re-IP settings here as well. So you can start configuring, maybe you're running a completely different subnet on the target side. Rather than you manually changing the IPs, Zerto can do that for you on move or failover, and test failover as well. So again, you've got all of these different capabilities in here. And then lastly, if I show you Azure, and again, the same level of integration that we have in there. So again, you can choose your VMs that you choose to protect, choose your journal history, choose whether you're utilizing any of these disks as temp data. And then lastly, you then have the different breakout options within here. So again, you've got the options to choose which virtual network you want to recover into in a failover, a move, or also a test failover, which subnet, which network security group you want them to be aligned to. We actually in here choose you which recovery disk type you want to be recovered into as well. So we support standard or premium managed as well. And again, you can choose the instance size here as well. Obviously, these are the defaults, as I said. If you go into advanced VM settings, you can come in and edit that on a per VM basis as well. So really the key thing that I wanted to get across here is that deep integration. We're integrating with the platform natively from an orchestration perspective, but also from our replication and protection perspective. All of that is deeply integrated into the platform, so we're not reliant on agents or anything occurring within any of the protected VMs that ultimately has an impact on production.
Right. So you're, from the Zerto dashboard, able to provide someone that real multi-cloud operational perspective and say, regardless of where your VPGs are or where you want to move them to, you've got both a consistency in what you're doing across all those, but also exposing some of the unique features of those target sites so that someone can take advantage of them.
Absolutely, that's the idea. The idea is that there's, we're not just moving a VM and then that VM comes up as it was on the production side. We're moving that VM and making sure that it's coming up as you want it on that target side, regardless of what that target side is. And that's key to obviously that hybrid cloud, multi-cloud strategy that we're seeing become the dominant force in IT strategies.
Outstanding, outstanding. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's great because virtual protection groups on each of those platforms look the same at one level, but you're still able to take advantage of the underlying features on each platform independently.
Correct. All of these platforms, as I said, are different. They have different benefits, different functionality. So having those different elements to be able to, really provide optimum orchestration, that is massive for providing that mobility across any sort of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud strategy. And that's about saving time, saving costs, reducing resource overhead, and minimizing production impact. What's the impact on the business from moving things around? There probably is one. So making sure that's as small as possible is again key.
And do you see people being more fluid with moving their workloads around now that they can? If you have sort of locked the closet, now workloads are really starting to fly everywhere?
Yeah, and some of these are planned, some of these are unplanned, but absolutely, we had one user. They were it was last year, I think, with a big hurricane coming in. And they essentially moved their entire platform, their production workloads, into a cloud location elsewhere because both of their data centers, their on-premises data centers, were in the firing line for the hurricane. Right. And so they moved off, and then when the hurricane had gone, they were able to move their workloads back.
And make sure they move to an availability zone that's
Absolutely,
not in that hurricane also, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're getting into the cloud, you have to be able to migrate from one availability zone to another because some of these disaster threats are really large, right? They encompass half a country in terms of power outage or a hurricane or who knows what.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously talked a bit about mobility, but protection and data protection is just as key. There's this perception of cloud that as soon as you put something in cloud, it's safe, and the same considerations that you'd have for on-premises don't exist anymore. But it's a data center somewhere running on hardware somewhere, And absolutely, you still need to have a consideration around how you're protecting your data.
One of the things I was interested in talking to a couple other people are the use cases. People are now putting Zerto to, one of them we were talking about involved sandboxes and bringing up thousands of near production copies that were just in production, taking the replicates, bringing them up and putting there. It sounds like you could have a choice of cloud to bring them up in. So if you want to do that bursting,
yes,
you can burst 1,000 machines into a cloud with your credit card and test it and bring it all back down, and it's not even an ongoing footprint.
No, exactly. We've got a lot of customers who utilize it for their development teams in exactly that way. Being able to bring up a replica of your production environment from seconds ago rather than one that you built last year that's probably got differences. That's pretty huge. Even if it's as simple as things like testing updates on application, Windows updates, things like that. Another big one is security testing and things, so you can test the application. Obviously, you want to keep this environment more similar in that scenario, but yeah, that whole mobility piece and being able to bring stuff up in isolated sandboxes is really powerful.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here today, Steve.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it. We're going to be back with some more very cool stuff about Zerto 7 and beyond coming up soon. Take care.